Hiya, welcome back to the channel if you've been here before. If you're new, welcome. Today we're going to talk about the dangers of wild camping. And no, midges isn't one of them, although they're really annoying. Yeah, the reason for me doing this video is because every time I mention to somebody that I'm going wild camping, they always go, "Oh God, aren't you scared? Aren't you crazy? You know, it's so dangerous." And actually, I think that's a real shame because we're so lucky to live in this country where we've probably got the safest countryside in the world, and yet people are scared to enjoy it. You know, wild camping, yeah, it does come with some dangers, but if you're sensible, it really isn't that dangerous. But anyway, I thought I would go through what I think are the top 10 dangers of wild camping. I've done a lot of research. I've tried to get some statistics and things like that. But yeah, I'm going to take each one in order, starting at number 10. We're going to work our way through to number 1 and hopefully share with you some tips as well to reduce your risks whilst you're wild camping. Hopefully you'll find this interesting and useful. We'll see. Let me know what you think in the comments anyway. What order would you put things in? What do you think are the top dangers? Right then, so starting with number 10. Number 10 I've put as trees. And by that I mean trees that are likely to fall on you, whether that's in high wind or because of widowmakers. So according to the Office of National Statistics, around about 5 to 6 people die per year from trees, like trees falling on them, but none of those were actually wild campers. So yes, there is a risk there. You're putting yourself more at risk, obviously, if you're camping under trees, but it's made its number 10 spot because none of those deaths were actually related to camping or wild camping that I could find anyway. But yeah, what you want to do is obviously look above you. Look for any widowmakers. So if you don't know what a widowmaker is, that's like a big branch that's hanging down that if it was to fall, it would probably kill you. Or trees blowing over. So always look for trees, and not necessarily trees that are this close. Look a few trees backwards, because if that one falls over, sometimes it's a bit like a domino effect, okay? And the last thing you want is a tree falling on your tent, because that's going to be a bad day. Okay, number 9 is fires. According to the Office of National Statistics, around about 350 people die a year from fires, which is pretty scary. Again, I couldn't find any statistics or even any news reports of campers dying from fires. We know that tents are pretty flammable. I did try to find some videos of how quick a tent would go up. I was kind of surprised actually. The couple that I did find, it wasn't like I was expecting it to be a fireball, like instant poof. So it does take a little while for the majority of tents, especially if they're sprayed with fire retardant spray. But anyway, what was I going to say about fires? Yeah, I've written everything down. Basically, you want to avoid having an open fire, particularly on open moorland. The main risk really with fires is not necessarily causing your death or your mate's death, but wildfires. That is a genuine risk, and every year there's, you know, dozens of wildfires across the country that are caused by campers really. The other main risk as well is discarded cigarette butts. So yeah, don't leave your fags just burning, you know, make sure it's stubbed out, take them home with you. In fact, there is actually bylaws in place in certain areas. So in the Peak District, for example, there's a public spaces protection order which bans open fires, barbecues and stoves from being used in certain places. So yeah, no open fires on moorlands. I'm not opposed to having a fire for a camp. I have had fires, but you know, you've got to make sure that you dig your pit properly, fingers length depth. And the reason to do that is to check that there's no roots like this, because if you have a fire, that root could potentially start burning and backtrack. Make sure you're not on peat ground, not in open moorland, preferably with some water nearby that you can put your fire out. Just minimise your risk as much as possible. Okay, so number 8. So this is probably the risk that most people worry about that don't come wild camping, and it's people. What's that over there? Look, somebody come in. Most people are really scared that you're going to get attacked or something out in the countryside, and I think a lot of that has got to do with high profile media cases like the Moors murderers, Myra Hindley and Ian Brady, who buried the victims. So they didn't actually attack the victims on the moors, they just buried them on the moors. And then, you know, other countries like Australia where they had the backpacker murders. I think there was something like 7 people died by this one serial killer. So yeah, it's a risk, but generally in the UK, I couldn't find any cases of people being assaulted or murdered whilst on walks or camping or anything like that. What could happen is being asked to move on, and that is a much higher risk. But still, I've never had actually any problems. Sorry, these midges, oh my God. Oh, they're doing my nutting. Not on the list because they're not dangerous, but God, are they annoying. Get off. What was I saying? People, not such a big risk in my opinion. Yes, there's a risk. 700 people die a year from homicide. So I can't say it's not a risk, but none of those were connected to wild camping. Number 7 on my list is getting lost. So this is a very real risk if you're out wild camping in the middle of nowhere and you don't know where you're going. Every year, apparently, there's around about 200 cases of people getting lost. So yeah, definitely a risk. I think with modern technology today, that risk has lowered in some ways, but increased in other ways. So you've got Google Maps, AllTrails, OS Maps, all brilliant navigation devices. But AllTrails, for example, is actual people's plotted routes. And they're not always that accurate, to be honest. So yeah, beware of AllTrails, beware of Google Maps and people's little photos that they've pinned, because they're not always in the right place. OS Maps, I do highly recommend that app. You can't go wrong with it in the UK. And of course, you can't beat a good old-fashioned map and compass. It's no good having OS Maps on your phone and you don't know how to read a map. You know, you need to be able to look at it and go, right, that's the top of a mountain, that's the bottom, that's how steep it is, I'm at this kind of elevation, you know, that's north. Just some basic navigation skills, really. Some of the other tips in terms of reducing your risk for getting lost are make sure you're looking around you, look back and make note of what things look like in the opposite direction. Even take a photo can be quite handy, actually. It's something I've done a couple of times just to remember the way back. And study the route. So when I'm going places that I don't know, I study the route. I know exactly where that wall is, where the division of the path is, where there's woodlands, streams, all that kind of stuff. Know your route really well. Generally, you're only going to be hiking for a couple of hours, so it's definitely doable to be able to memorise a route. Obviously, if you're doing a long distance route, that becomes a lot harder, and that's where you need your proper map skills, because as well, you've got to keep your phone charged up and that is quite a challenge. You can buy these little battery packs, so definitely recommend taking a battery pack with you. But yeah, having a map and a compass is like rule number 1 basic level navigational skills. Oh yeah, I'd also say as well, be careful of YouTube editing. And I know I've done this, so I'm guessing other people have done it, where I might actually show a route to somewhere, but because I want to add my own little artistic kind of flair to it, in terms of I want to make it look exciting and a bit of a flow to it, sometimes I'll change the order of things that happened. So be careful. If you think that you watched your favourite YouTube video and you know that route, you might not. Okay. And if you do get lost, don't be scared of asking somebody. You know, you never, in the UK, unlike where you've got America and Australia and, you know, other countries, Sweden, for example, you've got vast expanses of wilderness. The UK, we don't. We have got some very wild areas, but if you stick to a path and you keep going, you're probably going to meet somebody. Or if you really are lost, just stay where you are. Somebody at some point in the next 24 hours is bound to come along. So you just need to make sure that you've got gear such that you ain't going to freeze to death. That is on the list, by the way, just not yet. Number 6 is Lyme's disease. If you don't know what Lyme's disease is, it's a bloodborne virus that's carried by ticks. Apparently there's around about 8,000 cases of Lyme's disease every year, which is a huge number. Apparently only 5% of ticks actually carry the disease, so your chances of getting it are still fairly slim, but you've got to be out hiking and out in the wild spaces in order to get Lyme's disease. That was kind of my basic theory with putting it at number 6, okay? The symptoms of Lyme's disease is a bullseye rash on the skin, but you might not get the rash. The other symptoms are like a fever and cold-like symptoms and feeling like really achy and that kind of thing. And it can be really nasty. It can be really quite serious, actually, if it's left untreated, although fatalities are very rare. It's just the treatment is a 4-week course of antibiotics, so it's not too bad. Definitely some things you can do to reduce your risk. Make sure that your trousers are tucked in. You can even tuck them into your socks if you're in a high risk area. Some nice ankle length boots, so just reduce your amount of bare skin basically. And always carry with you either some tick tweezers or a little tick card, and they can be used to get the ticks out of your skin as quickly as possible. Also applying some insect repellent, so DEET based insect repellent. And for your dog, I highly recommend the Seresto collar. So I gave this to Xena. I put it on her neck, obviously. I didn't just give it to her as a present. And literally, I saw the ticks jumping off her. It's that good. Yes, she has had a couple of ticks with it on, but anything that makes ticks jump back off a dog is going to be good, all right? So yeah, I recommend the Seresto collar. And they last for like, I think it's 9 months. So you just, yeah, they're a little bit more expensive. I think they're about 30 quid or something. But then you can just forget about it then for the rest of the year. So now we're getting into the top 5 dangers of wild camping. So number 5 is hypothermia. So that's being really, really cold, dying of the cold basically. And the stats of this are staggering. 9,000 deaths in the UK per year from hypothermia, which is just, mind-boggling. And a similar risk is hyperthermia, so that's being too hot, basically heat stroke. Apparently there's 4,500 deaths from heat stroke every year. So of the 9,000 deaths for hypothermia, again, I really struggled to find any that were specifically linked to wild camping or hiking, although there are some news reports of hikers dying from hypothermia. Hyperthermia, again, I couldn't find any cases related to wild camping or hiking, although I'm sure that there are a lot of call outs for heat stroke, especially during the summer in the UK. I just couldn't find any information about that particular risk. So if we go with hypothermia then, some things that you can do to reduce your risk: avoid getting wet in particular, and the wind and if your clothes are wet, it can actually reduce the thermal efficiency of your clothing down to 85%, so almost non-existent. And with the wind effect as well, you will freeze very, very quickly. So you need to make sure that you've got a good sleeping bag that's rated to the temperatures that you're going to be experiencing, and a good sleeping mat, not just sleeping on the floor or a little bit of foam mat. It's just not going to do the job, especially in winter. Some other bits of gear that I'd recommend is carrying with you a foil blanket as emergency, and things that will maybe keep you warmer, so hot hands, or like a hot water bottle, something along those lines, as a little bit of a backup if your sleeping bag ends up not being as warm as you thought it was going to be. I don't think I slept at all. Mostly just because I was cold. Big mistake bringing the summer bag. If you want some tips on camping in winter, watch my video because I did 10 tips for winter camping. Number 4, it sounds like a little bit of a joke, and I didn't really take this risk seriously, but apparently 4 to 5 people every year die from cows. So yes, they can actually be quite scary. If you've ever had to cross through a field with a herd of cows and they all start coming towards you, and I have had that happen, especially when I had Xena, and they're big, you know, when they get up close and they're all herding towards you. I've been chased out of field a couple of times from cows. It's no joke, people actually do die from this, and the reason that I've put it at number 4 is because you're not going to die from cows if you're in the countryside. So it's the first one on the list really where the deaths, 45 deaths a year, are clearly attributable to people being out enjoying the countryside. So that's why it met number 4, although I would say, is it the biggest risk? No, definitely not. It's at number 4, obviously, but yeah, I would say the order of these is totally up for debate. I tried my best. I poured over the stats and the list, and I changed things around several times. But yeah, the reason that this made number 4 was because those deaths are clearly walkers, people out enjoying the countryside. The advice, if you do get a herd of cows coming towards you, is to walk quietly and calmly, get out of the field, give the cows as much space as you can, and if you have got a dog with you and they're getting close, let the dog go, because they'll chase after the dog. The dog will outrun cows all day long. So number 3 is probably one of the things that we're all very much aware of when we're camping, and it's carbon monoxide. Apparently every year in the UK, around about 50 people die from carbon monoxide poisoning, and 6 of those are usually related to camping. So that's why it's beaten cows, because cows were 4 to 5 deaths. This is around about 5 to 6 deaths every year. People in tents bringing their stoves or their barbecues inside the tent. Really bad idea. So the main thing here is make sure if you are going to be cooking with, you know, when you're camping, is do it outside the tent, or if you are cooking in your tent because it's absolutely throwing it down, which happens a lot in the UK, make sure it's really well ventilated. The signs, the symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, you won't smell it. It's a colourless, odourless gas. But what you will notice is feeling dizzy, having a headache, and feeling nauseous. And it's no joke, people. You know, there's some really sad news reports out there with, you know, even young children dying whilst camping because they brought the barbecue into the tent. Yeah, really sad stuff. Other things that you can do to reduce your risk as well, particularly if you're hot tent camping, make sure that your stove, the flue for your stove is nice and clean. So clean it every time you're about to use it. Make sure that there's good airflow, particularly the little holes at the top. And carry with you a carbon monoxide alarm as well. Number 2 on the list, nearly there, is accidents, general accidents, and I looked at the mountain rescue statistics for this. So every year they get called out to around about 650 accidents that can result in death. So 34 of those actually resulted in death. And the main causes actually surprisingly was heart attacks. So make sure you're not overdoing it. Build up your fitness levels. The next one was falls, which probably isn't too much of a surprise. So yeah, don't attempt really dodgy paths like Striding Edge, Sharp Edge, Swirl Edge, the places like that are well known for being difficult to traverse. If you're not confident and you haven't got the right footwear and it's adverse weather conditions. Other accidents that might happen: cuts and burns can be very nasty, drowning incidents, and twisted ankles as well. So yeah, there's a lot of different accidents that can happen whilst you're out in the wild. But I just want to point out as well that actually you're far more at risk doing other sports like football, cricket, cycling, horse riding than wild camping or walking out in the countryside. So just to put a little bit of perspective on that one. So last but not least, the number 1 risk of wild camping. What do you think it's going to be? It's actually road traffic accidents. That's what I always tell people. The most dangerous thing about wild camping is the drive there. Unfortunately, on British roads, around about 1,700 deaths on the road every year, and your risk of dying is 4 times more likely on rural roads. So really scary, and it's not a joke at all. So whilst I can't attribute those deaths to wild camping, I do think that the drive there is actually probably the most dangerous thing about wild camping in the UK. I think it's such a shame that we don't enjoy our countryside more in the UK. Like I said, it's probably the safest countryside in the world. We don't have bears and wolves and poisonous insects and poisonous snakes and generally things that are going to kill you. We also don't have really extreme weather events like tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, or just, you know, real extremes of weather. Yeah, it can get quite cold in Britain. Yes, we can get some snow, but it's not like we're in Canada or, you know, the northern Sweden, for example, where, you know, you're looking at -30. So yeah, I really want you to actually get out there and enjoy our countryside, because literally the thing that's you're most at risk at is having an accident on the way there. And yet you're happy to get in the car every day, going to work, going to the shops, picking up the kids. Just get out there and enjoy it. But you've got to work to your own abilities, you know, build up slowly. Start off small, build up slowly. Don't just go, right, my favourite YouTuber camped at the top of Helvellyn in like knee-deep snow a few weeks ago and it looked like a right good laugh. You know, they've been doing it for years. They've got all the gear and they know what to do if things go wrong. And some people still say that they're idiots. So yeah, just, you know, don't take too big a chances. Let people know where you're going. Make sure that your phone's charged up and that you've got a charger to keep it charged up. Stick to routes. Don't cook in your tent. Make sure that where you camp is a nice safe spot, and you should have a pretty good time. All right. I'm going to get on with my camp now. It's a shame midges didn't make it on the list, isn't it? Because they're so annoying. But they're not dangerous, so they're not on the list.